Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Shri Radha Govinda Dev Ki Jai Kali Yuga Dharma Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Parshva Ekadashi Ki Jai Shri Vaman Dev Ki Jai. Welcome to day 2 of our Vamana Katha. Yesterday when we left off, it was extremely exciting, and the demigods and the demons had been engaged in fighting, and the demigods were getting thoroughly beaten by the demons, headed by Bali Maharaja. And so they felt, the word Srimad Bhagavatam used was discouraged. But it seemed like that was an understatement. They had had a mountain thrown on them. They had trees, burning trees thrown on them. They had rocks thrown on them. Bali Maharaj used his mystic potencies and all of his illusory energy to create a fire in the midst of the battlefield. And then after he created a fire in the middle of the battlefield, he created an ocean with tidal waves in the midst of this battle. So one moment, the demigods were being burned. The next, they were being drowned. And so Srimad Bhagavatam says that they were feeling very much discouraged. And in that mood, they all came together and began to meditate wholeheartedly on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it says, at that moment, at that very moment, the Lord himself rushes in on the back of Garuda, and he rushes in to save the day. So that is where we left off yesterday, and that is where we will pick up today. But we have a couple of things to do first in order to set our mood and our intention properly. As always, just as Srila Prabhupada began his lectures and kathas and satsangs with the chanting of Jai Radha Madhava, we will also begin with Jai Radha Madhava. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Giri Varadhari Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Giri Varadhari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda Shri Radha Madhava ki jai Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai Shri Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. And as we started yesterday, we are also going to chant the 5th verse from the Das Avatar Stotram in praise of Lord Vamana Dev, because it is his birthday celebration extravaganza. And since we are having this katha in honor of him, we'll chant the 5th verse. The translation first is, O Keshava, O Lord of the universe, O Lord Hari, you have assumed the form of a dwarf Brahmana. O wonderful small one, by your massive steps you deceive King Bali, and by the Ganges water that has emanated from the nails of your lotus feet, you deliver all living beings within this world. Chalayasi vikramane Balimadbhuta Vamana Padanaka Janita Janapavana Keshavadrita Vamana Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare. And lots of mystical, magical stories contain secret incantations. But our incantation for all of these pastimes has been given to us by Shukadev Goswami, by Srila Prabhupada. And it is so simple. So just as we'd have the magic word, open sesame, or abracadabra, in order to find our way into these magical pastimes, we can chant the magical incantation, the mantra invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And with that, we find ourselves ready to begin and to find out what happens next in this most epic battle between the demigods headed by Lord Indra and the demons headed by Bali Maharaj. As we read yesterday, I will be reading from the condensed Srimad Bhagavatam, compiled by His Grace Purna Pragya Prabhu, who so wonderfully holds true to all of the translations and the important messages of the purports of Srila Prabhupada. So we are all very thankful to Purna Pragya Prabhu for doing this great service so that we can read through this glorious story on the very Appearance Day celebration of Vamana Dev himself. So, finding no means of counteracting the attack, the demigods began wholeheartedly meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In reciprocation, the Lord immediately appeared upon the scene, carrying weapons in his 8 hands and riding upon the back of Garuda. Just as the dangers of a dream cease when one awakens, so all the illusions created by the jugglery of the demons were at once vanished, vanquished by the prowess of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as soon as he entered the battlefield. Upon seeing the Lord's arrival, the demon, Kalanemi, who was riding upon the back of a lion, whirled his trident around menacingly and then threw it at Garuda's head. We have heard this name Kalanemi before. When we were reading through the pastimes of the advent of Lord Sri Krishna, we found that Kalanemi is reborn as the demon Kamsa. So this is prior to Kamsa, prior to the advent of Lord Krishna, yugas before. The Lord easily caught the trident in his hand, however, and with the very same weapon, he killed Kalanemi, along with his lion carrier. The Lord then severed the heads of Mali and Sumali with his chakra. After that, Malyavan, while roaring like a lion, tried to attack Garuda with his club, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead also severed his head with his razor-sharp disc. Thereafter, the Lord mercifully brought back to life all the demigods that had died in battle. Being thus enlivened, the demigods began routing their enemies, and when Indra angrily prepared to kill Bali Maharaj with his thunderbolt, the demons very anxiously cried out in distress. So, we were speaking yesterday about how the demigods encountered so many different obstacles on the battlefield. Oceans, fires, mountains, etc. Carnivorous demons from all directions. So here we hear that some of these demigods died. They lost their lives. But the Supreme Lord, once he arrived on the battlefield, he restored all of their lives back to them. How merciful is our Govinda. that even when we think that all hope is lost, even if our lives have been lost somehow, he can bring them back to us with nothing more than just a glance. Being thus enlivened, the demigods began routing their enemies, and when Indra angrily prepared to kill Bali Maharaj with his thunderbolt, the demons very anxiously cried out in distress. As Bali Maharaj fearlessly stood before him on the battlefield, Indra rebuked him, saying, "You rascal! As a thief sometimes covers a child's eyes so that he can take away his possessions, you are trying to defeat us by displaying some power of illusion, although you know that we are the masters of all such mystic powers. Today I shall sever your head from your body with my thunderbolt, which has hundreds of sharp edges. Now see if your jugglery will help you remain here in the company of your friends and relatives." Bali Maharaj replied, "Everyone here has assembled under the influence of eternal time and is destined to receive fame, victory, defeat, and death according to their previous activities. Those who understand the movements of time and are therefore cognizant of the actual truth neither rejoice nor lament. Because you are expressing jubilation on account of your anticipated victory, I can understand that you are not very learned. You demigods think yourselves to be the cause of attaining fame and victory, but because of this ignorance, saintly persons feel sorry for you. Therefore, although your words certainly afflict our hearts, our intelligence cannot accept them as factual." Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Bali Maharaj was speaking the same words that Sri Krishna speaks to Arjuna on the battlefield. That one who knows the truth of the soul and its position as servitor of the Supreme Lord neither rejoices nor laments over victory or defeat. So Bali Maharaj, we can see it, being the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj, was very much in tune with spiritual knowledge. He was not just a demoniac personality thinking with some demoniac mentality. He's the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj, and so he understands that everyone has been brought here under the influence of eternal time, who is none other than the Supreme Lord fighting on the battlefield himself. After rebuking Indra, Bali Maharaj released his arrows and then once again chastised the King of Heaven with strong words. Because Bali Maharaj's speech was truthful, Indra felt some shame upon hearing it, but he nonetheless released his infallible thunderbolt. As a result, the king of the Daityas fell down from his airplane like a mountain whose wings have been cut off. We spoke before many times about mountains in previous yugas. In previous ages, mountains were able to move and fly in the sky, and they even had wings. So we can see in this regard that it looked as though a mountain with its wings cut off. Upon witnessing the fall of Bali, Jambasura rushed at Indra while riding on his lion carrier and struck him severely on the shoulder with his club. Jambasura then beat Airavata so that the elephant fell down on its knees unconscious. Matali immediately brought Indra's chariot, and so the King of Heaven left aside his elephant carrier and mounted it. Although Jambasura smiled in appreciation of Matali's service, he quickly pierced the charioteer with his blazing trident. Then, as Matali tolerated the extremely severe pain with great patience, Indra angrily released his thunderbolt, striking off the great demon's head. When Narada Rishi informed Jambasura's friends and relatives of his death, 3 demons named Namuchi, Bala, and Paka went to the battlefield in great haste. After challenging Indra with cruel words, the demons showered him with torrents of arrows. Bala pierced all of Indra's 1,000 horses, and Paka attacked Matali and his chariot by releasing 200 arrows simultaneously, which was a very wonderful feat. Even Srimad Bhagavatam has to acknowledge the wondrous feats of even the demons. Namuchi injured Indra with 15 golden feathered arrows that roared like a rain cloud, while other demons supported the attack by incessantly showering their arrows. When Indra became invisible due to being covered by all these arrows, the demigods very anxiously lamented their fate like shipwrecked merchants in the middle of the ocean. Indra managed to free himself from the network of arrows, however, and thus he was once again seen to be riding on his chariot, shining brightly like the sun. When Indra saw how his soldiers had become very oppressed by the demons, he picked up his thunderbolt in great anger, and instantly cut off Bala and Paka's heads in the presence of the demons' relatives and followers. While witnessing the deaths of his two associates, Namuchi became very aggrieved, and so he made an all-out attempt to kill Indra. While roaring like an enraged lion, he picked up a steel spear ornamented with gold and silver bells. While coming in front of Indra, Namuchi shouted, "Now you are killed," and threw his weapon. When Indra saw the powerful spear coming toward him like a blazing meteor, he skillfully cut it to pieces with his arrows and then angrily released his thunderbolt, hoping to cut off the demon's head. And yet, even though Indra hurled the thunderbolt with great force, it failed to even pierce Namuchi's skin. Srila Prabhupada says that the demigods were engaged in this fierce battle against the demons, and that Bali Maharaj was even speaking very, very learned words that were even echoed by Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point that everyone is fighting some sort of war. Even though we might not feel as though we are directly on a battlefield, this life and this material existence itself is also a battlefield. So we should know that we are constantly fighting a battle, and that we must armor ourselves with the proper meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so, just as the demigods and demons are switching sides, and one is being conquered and the other is conquering, and then yesterday the demons were conquering and the demigods were being conquered, we should understand that at some times we find ourselves on the conquered end of life, and sometimes we find ourselves on the conquering end of life. But as we can see, Indra was rebuked by Bali Maharaj. He was shunned by Bali Maharaj when he began to speak all of these words, thinking himself to be the doer. Indra prayed to the Lord to help him, to save their lives. And when the Supreme Lord came, suddenly, when things were looking in their favor, then Indra began to speak as though he held all of the prowess. And so Bali Maharaj wanted to make clear that all of them were there, under the influence of time, under the influence of their previous activities, and under the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Bali Maharaj says, you look as though, you sound as though, you seem as though you will be victorious. But none of us are in control of victory or defeat. We are all under the influence and all under the control of time. All under the supreme control of Sri Krishna. And also under the control of material nature. So we have to understand our precarious situation. Srila Prabhupada often points out that our situation in this material world is very precarious, and that we have to utilize it in the service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, never forgetting who is really saving us, never forgetting who is really in charge of our victories, never forgetting who is shielding us from our defeats. So even though Indra hurled his thunderbolt, it failed to even pierce Namuchi's skin. When Indra saw this wonderful occurrence, he became very afraid and wondered if the demon was being protected by some superior power. Indra thought, "Formerly, when many mountains fell to the earth, killing numerous people, I cut off the wings of the mountains with this same thunderbolt." Vritrasura was the essence of all the austerities that had been performed by Twasta, and yet the thunderbolt was able to kill him. Indeed, many stalwart heroes whose skin could not be injured by all kinds of weapons were killed by this same thunderbolt. Now, however, even though it was released against a lesser demon, my thunderbolt has proved ineffectual. Since this thunderbolt, which was previously as good as the Brahmastra, has become no better than an ordinary stick, I shall no longer use it. While Indra was lamenting in this way, an ominous, unembodied voice announced from the sky, "This demon Namuchi cannot be annihilated by anything dry or moist. O Indra, because I gave Namuchi the benediction that he will never die because of any such weapons, you will have to think of another way of killing him." After hearing this, Indra began pondering over the matter very deeply, and while gazing at the ocean, he concluded that foam would be the proper means for killing Namuchi, because it was neither moist nor dry. Thus it came to be that Indra severed Namuchi's head with a foam weapon, and upon seeing this, all the great sages joyfully covered the king of heaven with showers of flowers. 2 Gandharva chiefs, Vishvavasu and Paravashu, sang in great happiness, while the Apsaras danced in jubilation, and the demigods played their celestial drums. Sri Krishna says in 15:15 of Bhagavad Gita that he is the source of all remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. And we have to remember that when we encounter such seemingly impossible tasks, when it seems as though everywhere we turn, it is a lose-lose situation, we have to remember to pray to the Lord, who is seated within everyone's hearts, and is the source of all remembrance, all knowledge, and all forgetfulness, and can easily impart to us the solution to any and all of our problems. Thereafter, Vayu, Agni, Varuna, and other demigods began slaughtering the demons, just as lions kill deer in the forest. When Lord Brahma saw the imminent annihilation of all the asuras, he sent a message with Narada. Coming before the demigods, Narada said, "My dear celestials, all of you are protected by the arms of Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by his grace you were able to drink nectar. Now please, stop this fighting." One would think, wouldn't they want all of the demons to be annihilated? Isn't that the aim of all of these avatars and expansions? But no. It seems that there is balance that always must be maintained. And as there are demons, there are also demigods. And they must maintain that balance. And like we said yesterday, simply because a demon is called a demon as per their race does not mean that they hold demoniac mentality. It does not mean that they cannot be devotees. Bali Maharaja himself is a great devotee. He is descended from a lineage of devotees coming from Prahlad Maharaj himself. So Lord Brahma does not want all of the demons to be annihilated. And he asks, through Narada, he asks the demigods to stop their fighting. Accepting the words of Narada, the demigods gave up their anger and ceased fighting. Then, while being praised by their followers, the demigods happily returned to their heavenly abodes. Thereafter, under the order of Narada, the surviving demons took Bali Maharaj, who was in a very precarious condition, to Astagiri Hill. There, Shukracharya brought back to life all the slain demons that had not lost their heads, trunks, and limbs by the use of his mantra, known as Sanjivani. When Bali Maharaj regained consciousness by the grace of Shukracharya, he became his loyal disciple out of gratitude, and thus offered everything in his possession to him. So it also says that Bali Maharaj had died even, and he was brought back to life by the Sanjivani mantra of Shukracharya, as were so many of the other demons. And feeling such immense gratitude, feeling such intense gratefulness to the sage Shukracharya, he accepted him as his guru. Now, we come to the chapter known as Lord Vamana. After being brought back to life by Shukracharya, Bali Maharaj became his disciple and began serving him very faithfully. In return, Shukracharya and the other descendants of Bhrigu became very pleased with Bali Maharaj, and because he desired to conquer the kingdom of Indra, they engaged him in the performance of the Vishvajit Yagya. After purifying Bali Maharaj and bathing him according to the regulative principles, the Brahmanas sat down in the sacrificial arena. So one person is asking, wasn't Shukracharya already the guru of the demons? Yes, but because they have a guru and he was acting on their side, there are also so many other gurus. And so we find that the demons will often, and the demigods also, will take shelter of so many different sages, and they will address them as their guru at a certain time. So in this way, Bali Maharaj now has accepted Shukracharya as his own guru. As soon as oblations were poured into the sacrificial fire, a celestial chariot appeared, along with yellow horses resembling those of Indra, and a flag marked with the symbol of a lion. There also appeared a golden bow, 2 quivers of infallible arrows, and celestial armor. Bali Maharaj's grandfather Prahlad then offered him a garland of ever fresh flowers, and Shukracharya gave him a conch shell. After having thus received the necessary paraphernalia for battle by the mercy of the Brahmanas, Bali Maharaj circumambulated them and offered his obeisances. Then, after offering his obeisances to Prahlad Maharaj, Bali got onto the celestial chariot and put on his protective armor. After making ready his weapons, Bali Maharaj assembled his soldiers and the other leaders of the demons, so that the combined warriors looked as if they were prepared to swallow up the sky and burn all directions with their vision. Bali Maharaj departed for the capital of Indra, and while going, he seemed to make the surface of the earth tremble. King Indra's city was full of very pleasing gardens that were filled with trees whose branches bent low due to the weight of their fruit and flowers. Beautiful women sported in those celestial gardens under the protection of the demigods, and the lakes there were surrounded and filled with lotus flowers and many species of exotic birds. Surrounding Indrapuri were moats of Ganga water called Akash Ganga, as well as high walls equipped with parapets for defense. The entire city had been constructed by Vishvakarma and was full of courtyards, wide avenues, assembly houses, and not less than 100 million airplanes. The crossroads were made from pearl, and the sitting places were made of diamond and coral. Again, this is why I love Srimad Bhagavatam. The sheer amount of detail is just astounding. It's amazing that Srila Prabhupada and Srimad Bhagavatam are able to put so much detail and pack so much into these Puranas just so that we can have all of this information. Everywhere was seen everlastingly beautiful and youthful women who seemed to glitter like the flames of a fire. The breezes that blew throughout the city bore the fragrance of all the flowers that fell from the hair of these damsels, combined with the smoke of aguru emanating from the windows of the residences. Throughout the city, the cries of peacocks were always to be heard, as well as the auspicious songs chanted by the beautiful women flying overhead in their airplanes. In addition, the sounds of flutes, stringed instruments, and drums played in concert along with the singing of the Gandharvas constantly filled the air. Thus the combined beauty of Indrapuri seemed to defeat the pride of beauty personified. No one could enter that city who was sinful, envious, violent towards other living beings, cunning, falsely proud, lusty, or greedy, for the people who resided there were all devoid of these faults. So one person is saying that the kingdom of heaven is not for a brahmachari, but we hear that there are many sages who walk amongst these different gardens. And even it says, no one could enter that city who was sinful, envious, violent towards other living beings, cunning, falsely proud, lusty, or greedy, for the people who resided there were all devoid of these faults. So, it depends on us, it depends on the strength of our spiritual progress. It depends on the strength of our accumulated spirituality. We have to make sure that somehow we become firm and fixed in our devotion. As Bali Maharaj attacked the outskirts of Indrapuri, he blew the conch shell given to him by his spiritual master Shukracharya, causing fear to enter the hearts of the women protected by Indra. When Indra and the other demigods saw the strength of Bali Maharaj's army and understood his intention, they hastily approached Brihaspati and said, "My lord, our old enemy Bali Maharaj has gained such astonishing prowess and enthusiasm that we cannot even imagine resisting him. It appears as if Bali is trying to drink up the universe with his mouth, lick up the 10 directions with his tongue, and set fire everywhere with his eyes. What is the cause of Bali Maharaj's newfound strength and influence?" Brihaspati replied, "My dear Indra, because the Brahmin descendants of Bhrigu Muni have become very pleased with Bali Maharaj, they have endowed him with this extraordinary prowess. You will not be able to conquer him now, for he has become empowered with their Brahma Tejas. Indeed, just as no one can stand before Yamaraj, no one can vanquish Bali now except the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you should leave the heavenly planets and remain elsewhere, unseen by others, and wait for the time when the situation becomes reversed. Later on, when Bali Maharaj insults the Brahmanas, he will surely become vanquished, along with his friends and associates." So sometimes it looks as though we cannot fight back against the negative obstacles in our path. And Indra and all of the demigods were facing such incredible obstacles. And they went to their own guru, and their guru told them it is time to retreat. Only the Supreme Personality of Godhead can defeat Bali Maharaj now. Wisely, they listened to their guru, Brihaspati. It is such a pertinent thing to know when to retreat. When to know that, okay, these obstacles are bigger than I am. I am not the controller. I am not the ultimate doer, I have to retreat. But where do we retreat? We must retreat into prayer. We have to retreat into the association of devotees who can help us. Into that association where we can all come together and center our minds and our hearts, where we can fix our hearts on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where we can pray to Him for His ultimate shelter and His mercy. Being so advised, the demigods assumed various forms according to their desires, and then left the heavenly planets, scattering here and there without being observed by the demons. Bali Maharaj then entered Indrapuri, and from there he proceeded to bring the entire 3 worlds under his control. After this, Shukracharya and the other Brahmin descendants of Bhrigu, being very pleased with their disciple, engaged him in performing 100 Ashvamedha Yagyas to enable him to remain upon the throne of Indra. As we spoke about yesterday, Bali Maharaj had to perform 100 Ashvamedha Yagyas just to gain the power to remain on the throne of Indra. But we obtained the same merit just by hearing the glories of Ekadashi yesterday. So if you would like to obtain that merit after this reading is over, that day 1 is up on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. If you just go to youtube.com/Acyuta Gopi, it'll be there. And you can listen to the glories of Ekadashi if somehow you missed it. And you can gain that same benefit of performing so many Ashvamedha Yagyas that Bali Maharaj had to do personally. We are always gifted. We are blessed by the unlimited, incalculable mercy of our Govinda Dev, who somehow makes shortcuts for us throughout all of our lives. He gives us these miracles in the forms of these many ways that we can reach Him. It is just up to us just to take the opportunity, to grasp at every single opportunity to get closer to Him. After performing these sacrifices, Bali Maharaj's reputation spread in all directions, and indeed he appeared to brilliantly shine while seated upon Indra's throne, like the full moon in the sky. By the mercy of the Brahmana, Bali Maharaj became very satisfied at having attained such an opulent position, and thus he began enjoying life in the kingdom of heaven. Due to the misfortune of her sons, however, Aditi began to lament like one who had no protector. Then after a long time, the great sage Kashyapa emerged from his trance of meditation and returned home to his ashram. Although Aditi greeted him with a proper reception, Kashyapa could see that she was morose and that their abode was now wrapped in gloom. So Aditi is the mother of the demigods, and Kashyapa is the father of both the demigods and the demons. So from his wife Diti, so many demons came, like Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, and they are known as Daityas and Danavas. And from Aditi came so many, millions of demigods, headed by Indra and Surya, and they are known as the Adityas. So there is such a balance. These demons and demigods are even related. So my Guru Maharaj says that they are quite similar. There is not very much difference between the demigods and the demons at all. They are both very beautiful, if they so choose. They both have very long lifespans. The one key difference is that the demons often find themselves inimical towards serving Lord Vishnu. Although in this case, as we shall see, even demons, take to the service of Lord Vishnu. And the demigods are always supposed to be engaged in the service of Lord Vishnu. But we see that sometimes demons behave like demigods, in the case of Bali Maharaja. And then sometimes we see that demigods wind up behaving just like demons. Indra killed so many brahmanas. He killed Vritrasura, who was not actually a demoniac demon. And he killed brahmanas. And then he tried to inundate and destroy all of Brajbhumi during the Govardhan Hill Leela. So sometimes we see that these demigods and demons, one of my very wise friends says that in previous ages, they were residing on different planets. So as the ages progressed, then sometimes they're residing on the same planet. Then sometimes they're residing within the same house. And they say that in Kali Yuga, sometimes we find that the demons and demigods are residing within the same person, within the same body. So it all comes down to a matter of mentality. We have both of these mentalities. It is up to us to make the choice. Do we want to embrace the demoniac mentality that says, no, I do not want to serve my Lord? Or do we embrace the demigod mentality that says, I am forever a servant of my Supreme Lord. I am not the doer. So it is all up to our mentality. And that's where we get divine and demoniac nature, the entire chapter within Bhagavad Gita, which lets us know that divine and demoniac nature is just a matter of mentality. It's a matter of our thought process and our desire and willingness to serve. After taking his seat, Kashyapa said, O most gentle one, has something inauspicious happened with regard to your execution of religious principles, your dealings with the Brahmanas, or with the people in general? Have there been some discrepancies in your execution of the principles of Dharma, Artha, and Kama, the following of which make the activities of a householder as good as those of the transcendentalists? Being too much attached to your own family members, have you failed to properly receive uninvited guests, who therefore went away disappointed? Homes from which guests depart without having been received with at least an offering of a little water are like the holes in the field that serve as residences for jackals. O chaste woman, because of my long absence, were you so anxious that you neglected to offer oblations of ghee into the sacrificial fire? O great-minded lady, are your sons faring well? By seeing your withered face, I can understand that your mind is not tranquil. What is this? So here we see the great position that the wife held within Vedic society. Even for Kashyapa Muni, while he was away, his wife was the one who would tend to the sacrificial fire. She would offer oblations and prayers into the sacrificial fire. She would receive guests. She would uphold the honor and the spiritual tranquility. She would uphold the spiritual power of the abode. So he was saying that, I see that the house has lost its luster and it seems gloomy. What happened? What has happened to you? So we see the much elevated position of the wife within Vedic society. He looked to her, even as he was offering his compassion and his shelter as a husband, he looked to her as an equal in her own regard, as a very powerful personality in her own regard, with her own dominion over the many areas of his spiritual life and the many areas over the household, which can hold the spiritual life of all the family members. Aditi replied, "O respected husband, because I always think of you, there is no possibility of my neglecting any of the religious principles." I think it's so wonderful that she has the responsibility of upholding so many religious principles. And they both know it. And she asserts, she proclaims that because she is always favorably thinking of her husband, that she has not neglected any of it. And it's like saying that I wouldn't let go of my duties because I am always thinking about you, always thinking about what is best for you. She's always thinking about what is best for her counterpart. My lord, since you, who are one of the Prajapatis, are my personal instructor, where is the possibility that all of my desires will not be fulfilled? Because you are a great personality, you are equal toward the demigods and demons, who are all born from your body and mind. However, even though he is equal to all living entities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is especially favorable to the devotees. Therefore, kindly favor us, the demigods, for we have been deprived of our residence, fame, and opulence by our enemies, the demons. Having become exiled from heaven, we are now drowning in an ocean of miseries. O best of sages, please consider our situation and then bestow upon my sons benedictions whereby they may regain what they have lost. Upon hearing Aditi's request, Kashyapa slightly smiled and then said, "Oh, how powerful is the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, by which the entire world becomes bound with affection for their children. Although the material body, which is made of 5 elements, is completely different from the real self, due to bodily attachment, one is regarded as a husband or son. These illusory relationships are all caused by a fundamental misunderstanding." The sage Kashyapa is thinking on the basis of the soul. And the soul can understand that although there might be a familial relationship now, one of father and son, mother and son, that can easily change with the next body, with another life. And so the sage Kashyapa is thinking in this way, thinking that, but nothing moves without the will and the sanction of the Supreme Lord. So even though he is thinking that there is a fundamental misconception, everybody is thinking in terms of this body and the relationships of this body, he can understand also that nothing moves without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. And so he says, how wonderful is this illusory nature of the Supreme Lord. My dear Aditi, you should engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the master of everything, who can subdue one's enemies, and who can bestow all auspicious benedictions upon everyone. The Supreme Lord, who is very merciful to the poor, will fulfill all your desires, because devotional service unto him is infallible. Indeed, in my opinion, any method other than devotional service is simply a useless waste of time. Kashyapa first tried to impart spiritual knowledge to his wife, so that she might become equipoised in loss and gain. However, when he saw that she was not ready to accept such instruction, he advised her to engage in devotional service for the fulfillment of her desires. Aditi was thus in the category of Arta, or one who approaches the Supreme Lord in distress. I think it is such an incredible point to be made, that first Kashyapa was going to impart spiritual knowledge, but he understood that she wouldn't be able to hear him, and he would just sound careless and heartless. And even though he could understand that we are not this body, he did not want to appear careless to someone who was in distress, someone who was very dear to him. So we should be very careful not to appear callous and hard-hearted to those who are similarly in distress, by just saying, "Oh, I will impart spiritual knowledge to you. Oh, you've lost your family, you've lost your job, you've lost your wealth, you're not this body. Why should you care?" that's just callous and hard-hearted. People will not be able to hear that spiritual knowledge. And if they're not able to hear that spiritual knowledge, they will not take it. And then what good is our preaching? Our preaching has not reached its goal. We have not fulfilled our devotional service then. We have to remember to be kind. We have to remember to listen to the distress of others and understand that, okay, they will not be able to hear. You are not this body right now. Let me soothe their hearts. Let me soothe their hearts with the beautiful pastimes of the Lord, and find some way where even by hearing, they can understand devotional service. Because if they can hear the beautiful and soothing pastimes of the Lord, then that is itself devotional service. And once they perform devotional service, the Lord cures all distresses. So we have to remember this great teaching of Kashyapa Muni himself, understanding that everything is moving by this illusory mentality. This is my friend, this is my family. But if someone is in distress, we should not hurl spiritual knowledge at them. We should not beat them over the head with spiritual knowledge. Kashyapa Muni himself did not do that. He understood that his wife was in great distress, and then he said, you should pray to the Supreme Lord, because he can cure everyone's distress. He will be kind to you. He is beneficial to you. He will always work in your favor, because he is very, very pleased with those who perform devotional service, even if they perform it in distress. And so he advised Aditi, his dear wife, to perform devotional service. And I want to leave off at this point, where we can remember to be kind and compassionate to everyone. Where we can remember that just as someone else's distress might just be due to their bodily conception, we can easily become distressed. We can easily be overtaken by the Lord's supreme potency. That illusory potency is very strong, and none of us are immune. We have to remember with a very, very humble heart, that it is only Krishna's supreme mercy if we have some understanding that I am not this body, and these distresses are only temporary and not this body. We have to understand and remember with great humility that this is a gift Krishna has given us. Like I said in that 15:15, he has given us remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So if we have some objective knowledge that we can see a situation objectively, we have to remember that that knowledge has come from Krishna only. And we have to remember that we can be kind. We can be soft-hearted. We can be gentle when we speak with others who are in great distress, understanding that yes, their distress is real. And we have to remember this great learning, this great lesson from Kashyapa Muni, that the Lord will be pleased with us if we preach compassionately, if we preach sweetly, and if we then somehow engage others just in devotional service. Because by that devotional service, the Lord will cure our distresses. He will take away those obstacles, and he will become the best friend of all of those who would become bereft. So I thank you so much. Tomorrow, we will continue. We will find out what devotional service Aditi performs and what is the result of that devotional service. All glories to the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All glories to Lord Vamana, who made his appearance. All glories to Bali Maharaja, who performed a vital role in this pastime. All glories to Radha Govinda. All glories to Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to all of you. Hare Krishna.